Hey gang, here we are once again at our presidential fun facts, seeing if you can memorize the presidents of the United States as we are approaching the middle of our semester. Here we go. Last time we left off with a history mystery, and our history mystery was the case of the body snatchers. This is Halloween week, and so I thought I would throw this in for some spooktacular trivia. Did you like that? Yeah. Which president's Secret Service members actually foiled an attempt to steal his body? Who could that have been? It's very spooky and kind of gross. But just so you know, body snatching in the 17 and 1800s was actually a thing and a real problem. People in the 18th and 19th century would steal bodies and dig them up to sell them to medical schools where science is exploring the human body and human anatomy, and they were worth money. These body snatchers were called resurrectionists, stealing people. And the president whose Secret Service actually foiled a plot to have his own body stolen and sold to a medical school was Abraham Lincoln. So there's your last history mystery from last time. Here we are, we're back into our presidents, and we left off talking about Zachary Taylor in 1849 to 1850. He was president of the United States. He was primarily a hero of the war with Mexico, and that's most what he's known for. He was a member of the Whig Party. Remember, Whigs were anybody that opposed Andrew Jackson, and after Andrew Jackson was no longer president, there really wasn't any reason for them to be around any longer. They stayed around for a few more years, but then they just sort of fizzled out, not having anything to unify them. He was a slave owner, but he didn't really take much of a stance on slavery, other than he really felt like that the Union would not stay together if Southern states were allowed to secede. He would use the U.S. Army to keep the Union together. He was willing to do that if necessary to prevent Southern states from leaving the Union. He also thought that slavery should not be allowed to continue out west. And this is the time during sectionalism and major westward expansion as a part of Manifest Destiny. As a result, Southerners were really angry with him. And as people are moving further and further west, these tensions grow, and we're getting closer and closer to the Civil War. He actually died very suddenly in 1850. He was only the second president to die in office, and he had been attending a celebration at the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument, you can see being built here in the background during the Civil War, had a bunch of fits and starts, and ultimately this is what it looked like in the 1860s. You can see there, not very big. And it's likely that he got food poisoning from food at the celebration. Our next president is Millard Fillmore from 1850 to 1853. He was the vice president to Zachary Taylor and found himself having to take over the Oval Office. He has a true rags to riches tale where he was born poor and worked his way up to become president of the United States. He believed that compromise should be used rather than the military to keep the United States together. And he signed bills that ultimately made up the Compromise of 1850, postponing the Civil War for about 10 years. Does that say Millard Fillmore? Oh, it does. Okay, so Millard Fillmore. Still talking about Millard. There we go. I goofed. Anywho, Millard Fillmore and the Compromise of 1850. According to this, California would be added as a free state where no slavery would be allowed in that state. And the boundary of Texas was settled. And New Mexico was given some territorial status. As part of the Compromise of 1850, Southern states got the Fugitive Slave Act, which essentially said that they could get their slaves, runaway slaves, returned to them if they were in other states, northern states that may have not had slavery. It even said that federal officials could be used and they could use bounty hunters. The slave trade was, however, abolished in the District of Columbia, but slavery was still allowed. So there you have the Compromise of 1850. Then you have Franklin Pierce from 1853 to 1857. He was another general in the Mexican-American War. He's widely considered one of the most effective presidents in the United States. I'm sorry, not most effective, least effective. I mean, when you have hair like that, not a lot's going your way. He reopened the slavery issue with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, as both Kansas and Nebraska are attempting to become states. The question is, will they be free or slaves? So the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed those two states to essentially vote to determine whether or not they would be slave or free. This essentially ends the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and led to an event called Bleeding Kansas. He was so unpopular that he was never renominated by his party. And one of the things that he was said to have said, or heard to have said after the nomination convention, and he did not win the nomination, was, "There's nothing left to do but get drunk." And unfortunately, he had suffered quite a bit in his adulthood with losing children and spouses, and became an alcoholic and spent his later years drinking quite a bit. Then we have James Buchanan from 1857, taking us up to the Civil War in 1861. During his term of office, the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could not actually restrict slavery in the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision. Buchanan thought that this would settle the issue of slavery, but unfortunately it did not. And in December of 1860, South Carolina, after the election of Abraham Lincoln, seceded, and Buchanan thought that they had the right to do that and did nothing. Dred Scott was a slave who was moved into the Missouri Territory by his master. And once he got there, he argued and sued for his freedom, saying now that he was living in a free state, he was entitled to that freedom. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not agree with him, and in fact said that he was personal property and as a slave of his master, and therefore had no standing to sue or right to sue as a U.S. citizen, essentially stripping slaves of even the potential of earning citizenship, and essentially denying even freemen rights of citizenship. So that's a pretty big setback. And you're starting to see divisiveness in all parts of the country spreading, and we are definitely on our way to civil war. So that is your week of presidents, and come back soon and we'll have another set for you.